Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is LL3's podcast. My name is Craig, and today is December 17th, 2013. Right now it's a nice evening, cool breeze, full moon. Can't complain. Presiding right now in the swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today I'm going to be addressing In Memoriam. It's about Nelson Mandela, A Missionary Perspective, which was written by Charles Van Wyck. And you can get this on worldnetdaily.com, and don't worry, it will be on my title page on Spreaker account under Loki Luck III. Alright, let's get this started. Just to let you know, this was published 2 days ago, and I will read this and give you my perspective or my viewpoint. And it's called here, exclusive. Charles Van Wyck declares the war of worldviews is now in full swing. All week we've watched the international media and heads of state hail Nelson Mandela as a redeemer, even likening him to Jesus Christ. Some, albeit far fewer, reports make mention of his ties to terrorism and communism. Let's take a closer look at some lesser-known facts about Nelson Mandela and his brothers in arms, and see why there is little middle ground with regard to loving or hating the man. Terrorist or freedom fighter? Mandela confounded MK, which is Spear of the Nation, the armed wing of the African National Congress, or ANC. His decision to adapt the armed struggle was controversial. Many black Africans remained devout Christians and opposed the use of violence. The USSR, seeing an opportunity to control the minerals and trade supply route of southern Africa, endorsed the move and stood by to assist in implementation. Mandela's movement asserted that all nonviolent means had been exhausted in attempting to deal with the nationalist government, and the Sharpeville massacre and other atrocities by the white minority government made that statement ring true. But others doubt this, believing strikes, civil disobedience, and boycotts pose a better path to advance the cause of the black majority. South African society is complicated. Many blame communist agitation for the war against the white minority government. That's not entirely true. Black Africans endured real grievances. The communists exploited these to great effect. MK first attacked government installations, but soon it turned on soft targets where innocent victims were shot, hacked, or burnt to death. Mandela faced charges in the Rivonia trial, convicted of sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. He and 8 others received in 1964 life sentences. Many blacks argue that the court was controlled by the whites and therefore illegitimate. Please note, Mandela was not a political prisoner, a status which even Amnesty International refused to grant. He wasn't charged with crimes of conscience, like many Christians languishing in prisons of communist and Islamic countries. While in prison, he wrote How to Be a Good Communist, evidence later used against him. Prior to his February 4th, 1990 release, after 27 years in prison, he was offered conditional release if he would reject the violence as a political tool. He refused. Under Mandela's command, and with his knowledge and approval while in prison, MK waged a war with no distinction between combatants and civilians. All were targets in this people's war. The violence was largely blamed on the government and Inkatha, a large internal rival movement calling for liberation through non-violent means. A just war and just means, some argued. Consider such means, namely the Winnie Mandela necklace. Nelson's wife and others in the ANC terrorized blacks deemed against the struggle with this barbaric method of murder, learned in terror training camps in Angola and Mozambique, tying the victims' hands behind their back with barbed wire or hacking them off. ANC members placed a gas-soaked tire around the victim's neck and lit it aflame. The molten tire melted into their skin, and they died a very painful and terrible death. As president, although the world heralded his rise from prisoner to president, his time in office received little examination. South Africans understand the corruption of his rule, and his legacy continues to spiritually debase the nation. Many tried to separate the man from his colleagues and socialist and immoral party policies, but leaders must take responsibility. When he came to power, prayer recited aloud was removed from Parliament. The ANC, under Mandela's presidency, rejected reference to God in the Constitution. Only after 30,000 Christians marched to Parliament on the issue, they relented. In June 1995, his orders caused the massacre of 19 Inkatha Freedom Party members, taking part in a peaceful demonstration at Shell House, the headquarters of Mandela's political party. During a vote legalizing abortion on demand, he refused to grant members of parliament an option to vote pro-life and to violate their values and conscience. Catholic members who rejected this approach and didn't attend were fined. More than 1 million innocent lives have been taken since this law was passed. His government moved to disarm legal firearm owners. Fortunately, this move birthed Gun Owners of South Africa and the Black Gun Owners Association, whose black members struggled to attain legal firearms under the former white government and refused to relinquish them to Mandela's government. Graca, his present wife, and Nelson lived and traveled together before marriage. This led to a Christian parliamentarian publicly asking him what kind of example he was presenting our youth. Pornography was legalized, leading to a 400% increase in child rape cases in South Africa. Even child pornography, for the sake of artistic and literary expression, was okay under his presidency. His administration's constitution paved the way for same-sex marriage by giving sexual orientation and the same protections as race and religion. When subpoenaed to appear in court in 1998, the judge accused him of being an unreliable witness. On the other hand, many Christians respect Mandela for his attitude of forgiveness for those who imprisoned him, but his incarceration was due to being criminally convicted. I don't remember him asking for forgiveness from families of those who he and his MK cadres murdered and or maimed, nor did he seek forgiveness for those who suffered with his full knowledge in concentration camps run by his organization in Angola and Tanzania. In Quatro, prisoners suffered horrendously cruel human rights abuses. He condemned violence, but then only violence perpetrated by others, not those of MK or Winnie's infamous Mandela United Football Club. Praises ring out for Mandela for not having started a civil war in South Africa yet from 1984 to 1994. Some 20,500 people were murdered during the People's War, mostly black-on-black violence between rivals for the prize of the South African white government. Staggering numbers, yes, but consider that when Mandela took power, the murder count rose to more than 20,000 lives every year. Mandela publicly denounced racism, but then reintroduced racial discrimination with the policy of Black Economic Empowerment, or B. South Africa is the only country in the world to introduce B for the majority of the population and not for a minority group. Hundreds of thousands fled the country and settled in other Western nations. If racial discrimination by apartheid was evil, then surely racial discrimination through B is as well. Soberly examining the man. Though blessed with great charisma, showing flair of goodwill and respect from people worldwide, Mandela also had flaws and shortcomings, like you and I. He was a great leader for and of his people, of which I respectfully was not one. We do not absolve the previous government of its evils or cruelty, but observers are challenged to open their eyes and soberly examine the man without falling victim to blindly propaganda of the media's designation of sainthood. We can still properly mourn his passing. I'm sad that Mandela is gone. After all, the Bible tells us, quote, "Do I take any pleasure in the death of the wicked, declares the sovereign Lord. Rather, I am not pleased when they turn from their ways and live." That's Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 23. God's word also tells us how Christians should assess the character of politicians. We shouldn't idolize Mandela or any other man. We are, however, commanded, quote, "honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king." 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17. Christ is king. Although I fought in the war against Mandela's communist friends, had my car stoned by his supporters, and survived a terrorist attack by his network partners, after which I reach out to them with a gospel of Jesus Christ. I hold no bitterness against them. That war is over. But the war of worldviews is now in full swing. As very interesting viewpoint from Mr. Charles Van Wyck. And he did made a statement that he was involved in a terrorist attack within his network. And he wrote a book about it called Shooting Back, The Right and Duty of Self-Defense. Van Wyck makes a biblical Christian case for individuals arming themselves with guns, and does so more persuasively than perhaps any other author, because he found himself in a church attack by terrorists. I would recommend people should buy the book. And you don't have to be a Christian to appreciate the story, because he does what he addresses in his perspective and a biblical point of view, that self-defense is righteous. And I gotta say, if you want more information, go to charlesvanwyck.info, or you can get the book at Amazon, Guns of America, WellNet Daily, or go to your local bookstore. That would be a great thing to purchase. It's short, but a very powerful book. And you don't have to be a Bible thumper to appreciate his message. Even though he may use a lot of, creed and Christianity, but on a bigger perspective, bigger picture, that is, we should never idolize these figureheads. Rather, they're politicians, athletes, movie stars, rock stars, musicians, etc. They're all human beings. They have their strengths, their flaws, plus many of them have their rough edges. We could talk about many examples. Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and of course Many believe Hitler was a